As everyone gathered around the microphone under the string lights at the annual Rosewood Drive block party, Carolyn raised her glass, pretending to smile sweetly. She was being honored for outstanding community leadership, an award I knew she didn't deserve. The applause was loud. The admiration was real. But then, just as the mayor reached for her hand to present the certificate, a voice echoed from the back of the crowd. "Before you celebrate her, you should hear the truth." Everyone turned, and there he was, Mr. Henry Brooks, the same homeless man I had given a sandwich to just weeks earlier. Except now, he was clean-shaven, in a pressed jacket, and holding a faded folder that would rip Carolyn's perfect image to pieces, right in front of everyone she had manipulated for years. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the scene unfold. How did we get here? How did I, Emily Parker, the woman who just wanted to bake cookies and live a quiet life after my divorce, end up at the center of what was about to become the biggest scandal our little community had ever seen? It all started 3 months ago on a warm April evening when I first moved to Rosewood Drive. I remember the day clearly. The moving truck had just pulled away, and I stood on my front porch surveying my new beginning. The street was lined with maple trees just starting to bloom, their leaves a gentle green against the blue sky. Children rode bicycles on the sidewalks. An elderly couple walked their golden retriever. It was exactly the fresh start I needed after 5 painful years of marriage to Richard. Ended with him leaving me for his 26-year-old secretary. "Welcome to the neighborhood." I turned to see a woman in her 40s approaching my driveway. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and her smile dazzling, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She held a wicker basket covered with a checkered cloth. "I'm Carolyn Sanders, head of the Rosewood Neighborhood Association." She extended her hand. "We're so happy to have you join our little family." I shook her hand, grateful for the warm welcome. "Emily Parker, thank you for stopping by. These are just a few essentials to get you started," she said, handing me the basket. Inside were a bottle of wine, some artisanal bread, and a folder labeled Rosewood Drive Community Guidelines. "We take our, community very seriously here. It's why Rosewood has been voted Best Neighborhood 3 years running." I nodded, though something in her tone made me uneasy. "I'll be sure to read through everything." "Perfect." Her eyes scanned my modest furniture being carried inside. "I understand you're starting over?" The way she said it made my divorce sound like a personal failure. "Yes, I am." I straightened my shoulders. "Sometimes endings are just new beginnings in disguise." She smiled thinly. "How philosophical." "Well, there's a neighborhood committee meeting next Tuesday at my house. You should come. It's a great way to get involved." And that was my introduction to Carolyn Sanders, the unofficial queen of Rosewood Drive. I tried to follow her advice. I attended that first committee meeting, bringing homemade chocolate chip cookies that received polite appreciation but were barely touched. I volunteered to help with the community newsletter. I offered to organize a book drive for the local elementary school. But at every turn, I found myself somehow blocked. "Oh, we already have someone handling the newsletter layout," Carolyn would say, despite my background in graphics or design. "The school book drive is usually managed by someone with more established community connections," she explained, though I had run 3 successful ones in my previous neighborhood. At first, I thought I was being oversensitive. Maybe I was still raw from my divorce, reading too much into innocent comments. But then came the Spring Festival Planning Committee. I had been put in charge of coordinating volunteers, a small role, but one I took seriously. I created a detailed spreadsheet, contacted everyone on the list Carolyn had given me, and had everything organized perfectly. The day before the festival, I arrived early to help with setup, only to find Carolyn surrounded by committee members, clipboard in hand. "Emily, I was just about to call you," she said, though her phone was nowhere in sight. "There's been a slight change of plans. Margaret will be handling the volunteers today." Margaret, a timid woman who always seemed to hover near Carolyn, avoided my eyes. "But I've already coordinated everyone," I said, pulling out my folder. "I've confirmed all the shifts and—" "Yes, well, there were some concerns about your approach." Carolyn's voice dropped to a stage whisper. "Some people felt you were a bit pushy in your emails." My cheeks burned. My emails had been nothing but professional and friendly. "I don't understand. No one mentioned any issues to me." "That's just it, dear," Carolyn said, patting my arm condescendingly. "People don't always feel comfortable confronting someone who's new to how we do things here." I looked around at the other committee members. Most avoided my gaze, but a few gave me sympathetic looks when Carolyn wasn't watching. That night, I sat alone on my back porch, questioning whether moving to Rosewood had been a mistake. Richard's betrayal had shattered my confidence. And now, just as I was trying to rebuild, Carolyn seemed determined to push me to the sidelines. The next morning, I was pulling weeds in my front garden when an elderly woman stopped by my fence. "Don't let her get to you," she said quietly. I looked up, shielding my eyes from the sun. She was in her 70s with silver hair and kind eyes. "I'm Linda Harper. I live 3 doors down." She gestured with her cane. "I saw what happened yesterday at the setup. Was I really being pushy?" I asked, the insecurity evident in my voice. Linda shook her head. "Carolyn does this to anyone she sees as a threat. You're competent, friendly, and people naturally like you. That's all it takes to get on her bad side." For the first time since moving to Rosewood, I felt a genuine connection. Linda invited me for tea the following day, and through her I began to learn the real history of the neighborhood, and of Carolyn Sanders. She wasn't always the queen bee, Linda explained as we sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by photos of her late husband and their children. Henry Brooks. Now there was a true community leader. "Who's Henry Brooks?" I asked. Linda's eyes grew distant. "He was the heart and soul of this place. Owned half the land that became Rosewood. Had a vision for a real community, not just pretty houses and perfect lawns, but people who cared for each other. He started the Maplewood Senior Housing Project to make sure the elderly wouldn't be forced out as property values rose." "What happened to him?" Linda's expression darkened. "Carolyn happened. She worked for him as an assistant when the development was just starting. Somehow she managed to push him out, spread rumors about his mental health. The project funds disappeared. He lost everything, his reputation, his home, his purpose." "That's horrible," I whispered. "Where is he now?" "No one knows for sure. Some say he left town, others—" Her voice trailed off. "Others say he never really left at all." I didn't understand what she meant then, but I would. Soon enough. The summer heat arrived early in Rosewood that year, bringing with it the much-anticipated annual block party. Despite my complicated feelings about the neighborhood, and particularly about Carolyn, I was determined to participate. This wasn't just about proving myself. It was about finding my place in what I still hoped could be my home. I signed up to help with decorations, one of the few areas Carolyn hadn't micromanaged to death, working alongside Linda and a few other neighbors who had quietly befriended me over the months. I spent the day before the party hanging string lights across the community park, arranging flowers on the long tables, and setting up the stage where local musicians would perform. "Looks like we've got a natural talent for beautification," remarked Pastor Raymond, the kindly minister from the local church who had stopped by to help. He nodded appreciatively at the paper lanterns I'd strung between the oak trees. "Simple but elegant." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "I used to do event planning before—" I stopped myself. "Before your divorce?" he finished gently. I nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Small towns have big ears," he said with a sympathetic smile. "But also, you mentioned it during the prayer circle. Last month. I had almost forgotten about that." In a moment of vulnerability, I'd shared a bit of my story with the church group, one of the few places in Rosewood where Carolyn's influence didn't seem to reach. "Don't worry," Pastor Raymond continued, helping me secure a stubborn lantern. "Not everyone in Rosewood is caught up in appearances. Some of us still remember what this community was founded on." "Henry Brooks's vision?" I asked, remembering Linda's stories. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition? Yes, exactly that. A place where neighbors truly care for each other, not just about property values and committee titles. Just then, Carolyn's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. "Emily, those lanterns should be spaced evenly. We can't have the mayor thinking we're disorganized, can we?" She approached in a floral sundress that probably cost more than all my decorations combined, her eyes critically scanning my work. "The mayor's coming?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Of course," she replied, as if I should have known. "He's presenting the Community Pillar Award this year." Her smile turned smug. To me, actually. For my tireless dedication to Rosewood. Pastor Raymond cleared his throat. "I should check on the sound system," he said tactfully, giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze before walking away. Once he was gone, Carolyn dropped her voice. "I notice you've been spending time with Linda Harper." I continued hanging lanterns. "She's been very welcoming. Just be careful," she warned, her tone falsely concerned. "Linda's had memory issues since her husband passed. confuses the past with the present, makes up stories. My hands stilled. She seems perfectly lucid to me. Carolyn shrugged elegantly. Early-stage dementia can be like that. One minute they're fine, the next they're inventing conspiracies. I'd hate for you to be misled, especially when you're still finding your footing here. The threat was thinly veiled. Don't trust Linda. Don't challenge the narrative. Know your place. I chose my words carefully. Thank you for your concern, Carolyn. I'll keep that in mind. She seemed satisfied with my apparent submission and moved on to inspect the refreshment tables, leaving me seething inside. The day of the block party arrived with perfect weather, clear blue skies, a gentle breeze, and temperature in the mid-70s. By late afternoon, the park was filled with families. Children raced around the playground, teenagers helped serve lemonade, and adults clustered in conversation groups, their laughter carrying across the green space. Despite Carolyn's constant presence, I found myself enjoying the event. My decorations had transformed the ordinary park into something magical, and even Carolyn's most loyal followers had to admit it looked spectacular. "You've outdone yourself, Emily," said Margaret, the woman who had replaced me at the spring festival. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, as if afraid Carolyn might overhear the compliment. "Thanks, Margaret. It was a team effort." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, I noticed a solitary figure sitting on a bench at the edge of the park. An elderly man with a weathered face and tattered clothes watched the celebration from a distance, his expression unreadable. Something about him tugged at my heart. While everyone else was caught up in the community celebration, he sat alone, apart. Without thinking twice, I grabbed a plate from the buffet table, loading it with sandwich, triangles, fruit, and a generous slice of chocolate cake, and made my way toward him. "Would you like something to eat?" I asked, extending the plate. He looked up, startled by the gesture. His eyes were a clear, penetrating blue, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through me. "That's very kind," he said, his voice surprisingly refined despite his appearance. He accepted the plate with dignity. Most people pretend not to see me. "I'm Emily," I offered, sitting beside him on the bench. "I know who you are," he replied, taking a careful bite of the sandwich. "You're the new one, the one who makes cookies and tries too hard." I laughed, surprised by his directness. "That's me. Though I'm learning that trying too hard doesn't get you far in Rosewood. Not with Carolyn Sanders." "Running things," he agreed, his tone bitter. I studied him more carefully. His clothes were worn but clean. His white beard was unkempt but not dirty. There was something dignified about him, something that suggested he hadn't always lived on the margins. "You know Carolyn?" I asked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Better than most." His gaze drifted toward the stage where Carolyn was checking the microphone, preparing for her moment in the spotlight. "She's about to receive an award for community service, isn't she?" "The Community Pillar Award," I confirmed. "How did you know?" "I know how Carolyn operates." He finished his sandwich and carefully folded the napkin. "Tell me, Emily, what would you say if I told you that the woman about to be celebrated has built her reputation on lies and manipulation?" My heart skipped a beat. "I'd say that matches my experience with her." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. Then, reaching into his tattered jacket, he pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to me. "My name is Henry Brooks," he said quietly. The name hit me like a physical blow. Henry Brooks, the original visionary of Rosewood, the man Linda had told me about. The man who had lost everything. "But everyone thinks you left town? Lost my mind?" His smile was sad. Carolyn's version of events has always been more convenient for people to believe. I looked down at the paper he'd given me. It contained a phone number. Nothing more. "When you're ready to hear the truth, the whole truth, about Carolyn Sanders and what happened to the Maplewood Senior Housing Project, call me." He stood up, clutching the plate I'd given him. "But be careful. Carolyn doesn't take kindly to threats to her perfect image." Before I could respond, he walked away, disappearing into the gathering darkness beyond the park lights. On stage, Carolyn tapped the microphone, her voice booming across the park. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, welcome to the annual Rosewood Block Party." Applause erupted as I sat frozen on the bench, the paper clutched in my hand, my mind racing with questions. What had really happened between Henry Brooks and Carolyn Sanders? What was the truth about the Maplewood Senior Housing Project? And most importantly, what would happen if that truth came to light? Little did I know I was about to find out. I couldn't sleep that night. The encounter with Henry Brooks played on a loop in my mind, his weathered face and clear blue eyes haunting me even after I'd tucked the paper with his phone number into my bedside drawer. Was he truly the fallen community leader Linda had described, or just a troubled man with a grudge against Carolyn? The block party had ended with predictable fanfare, Carolyn accepting her community pillar award with false humility, thanking everyone for their support while somehow making it clear that she deserved all the credit. I had slipped away before the final speeches, unable to stomach any more of the charade. Morning brought no clarity. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, staring at Henry's phone number. Outside, Rosewood Drive was coming to life. Sprinklers activating on perfectly manicured lawns, luxury SUVs backing out of driveways, joggers in expensive athletic wear pounding the sidewalks. A knock at my door startled me out of my thoughts. Linda Harper stood on my porch, leaning on her cane, her face drawn with worry. "May I come in?" she asked, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Of course." I ushered her inside, concerned by her unusual, demeanor. Linda was typically cheerful, despite her age and physical limitations. She settled into a chair at my kitchen table, declining my offer of tea or coffee. "I saw you speaking with him yesterday," she said without preamble. "With Henry." I sat down across from her, suddenly alert. "So it really was him? Henry Brooks?" She nodded solemnly. "I've known Henry for over 40 years. Even in his current circumstances, I'd recognize him anywhere. But why is he living on the streets? What happened to him?" Linda's hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the table. "It's a long, ugly story, Emily. One that Carolyn has worked very hard to bury. He gave me his phone number," I admitted. "Said to call when I was ready to hear the truth about the Maplewood Senior Housing Project." Linda's eyes widened. "He must trust you. Henry doesn't reach out to just anyone these days." "I don't understand what this has to do with me," I said, confusion evident in my voice. "I'm just the newcomer who can't seem to fit in." "That's exactly why," Linda replied. "You're not entangled in Carolyn's web yet. You see things clearly." She leaned forward, lowering her voice despite us being alone. "In my house. The Maplewood project wasn't just any development. It was meant to be affordable housing for seniors, people like me who've lived here all their lives but can't afford the rising property taxes as the neighborhood gets improved. What went wrong? Money disappeared. Lots of it. Nearly $2 million in community funds and private donations, gone without a trace. Henry was blamed. They said he embezzled it, that he had gambling debts, that he'd lost his mind." Linda's voice cracked with emotion. None of it was true, but Carolyn had spent years building relationships with the right people. Her version became the official story. "And no one stood up for him?" I asked, horrified. Linda's gaze dropped to her hands. "Some of us tried. I was the project's bookkeeper. I knew the numbers didn't add up the way Carolyn claimed. But then," she hesitated. "What happened, Linda?" "My husband was up for a promotion at the bank, the same bank that held the project's accounts. Suddenly, there were concerns about his performance. Then my son's college scholarship was under review. Small things, but the message was clear. Stay quiet or suffer the consequences." My stomach churned. "That's blackmail." "That's Carolyn," Linda corrected me. "She never makes direct threats. She just makes sure you understand what you have to lose." A heavy silence settled between us. Outside, a lawnmower hummed. The mundane sound at odds with the dark conversation happening in my kitchen. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked. "Because Henry reaching out to you means something's changed." Linda's eyes met mine, a mixture of fear and determination in them. "He's been collecting evidence for years. If he's ready to come forward, then Carolyn could finally face consequences." I finished. Linda nodded slowly. "But it won't be easy, and it won't be safe, for any of us." After Linda left, I spent hours weighing my options. I could ignore Henry's note, focus on building my new life, and try to navigate Rosewood despite Carolyn's subtle sabotage. The safer choice, certainly. Or I could call the number. By late afternoon, my decision was made. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Emily Parker." Henry's voice answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting for my call. "I wondered if you'd contact me." "I want to hear the truth," I said simply. "Not over the phone." His tone was cautious. "Meet me at Willow Creek Park tomorrow at 10 a.m., the bench near the eastern footbridge." The line went dead before I could respond. Willow Creek Park was on the opposite side of town from Rosewood, a deliberate choice, I suspected, to avoid any chance encounters with neighborhood residents. I arrived early, the morning mist still clinging to the grass as I made my way to the designated meeting spot. Henry was already there, sitting straight-backed on the bench, gazing out at the creek. He looked different today. Cleaner, his white beard trimmed, wearing a worn but presentable button-down shirt and slacks. He didn't turn as I approached, but I knew he was aware of my presence. "Thank you for coming," he said, as I sat beside him. "Linda confirmed who you are." I replied. "She also said you've been gathering evidence." A slight smile crossed his weathered face. Linda always was too smart for her own good. "Yes, I've been collecting proof of what really happened. Slowly, carefully, for years." "Why now? Why me?" Henry turned to face me, his blue eyes intense. "Because after 5 years of watching from the shadows, I've finally found Carolyn's Achilles heel. And because you, Emily Parker, have nothing to lose and everything to gain by helping me expose her." "What do you mean?" From inside his jacket, he withdrew a worn leather portfolio. "This contains banking records, forged signatures, emails, and witness statements. Enough to prove that Carolyn Sanders embezzled nearly $2 million from the Maplewood Senior Housing Project, then framed me for the crime." My heart raced as I skimmed the documents he showed me. There it was in black and white. Transaction records showing money being siphoned into offshore accounts, emails from Carolyn to developers discussing how to repurpose the land for luxury condominiums, signatures on authorization forms that didn't match the supposed signatories. "This is overwhelming," I admitted, handing the portfolio back to him. "But I still don't understand what you want from me or why now." "The why now is simple," Henry said, tucking the portfolio away. "In 3 weeks, the City Council will vote on rezoning the original Maplewood Senior Housing land that's been sitting empty since the project collapsed. Carolyn has finally arranged for her developer friends to build luxury condominiums there. If that happens, we lose our last chance to reclaim the property for its intended purpose." "And me? What role do I play in this?" "You're new, untainted, and you've experienced Carolyn's methods firsthand, but she hasn't had time to truly dig her claws into you." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I need someone on the inside, someone who can help me gather the final pieces of evidence without raising suspicion." "What final pieces?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "Access to the neighborhood association's financial records for the past 5 years. Confirmation of specific meetings between Carolyn and the developers. And," he hesitated, "proof that she's planning to receive a luxury unit in the new development as a consulting fee for facilitating the rezoning." The magnitude of what he was asking hit me. "You want me to spy on Carolyn Sanders." "I want you to help me expose the truth," he corrected, "before she destroys what little is left of the community I built." I stood up, suddenly overwhelmed. "I need time to think about this." Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You have until the end of the week. After that, it will be too late to put everything in motion before the council vote." As I turned to leave, he called after me softly, "Emily?" I paused, looking back at him. "Whatever you decide, be careful. Carolyn has eyes everywhere in Rosewood." Walking back to my car, I felt as though I was being watched, though the park was nearly empty. Only a jogger and a woman walking her dog passed me on the path. What I didn't realize then was that the woman with the dog was Margaret, Carolyn's most loyal follower, and she had recognized me perfectly well. "A neighborhood cleanup drive?" Carolyn's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched skeptically as she regarded me across her immaculate dining room table. "That's your big idea for the summer outreach program?" I maintained my composure, though my palms were sweating beneath the table. It had been 2 days since my meeting with Henry, and I still hadn't made my decision. But when Carolyn unexpectedly invited me to her home to discuss community initiatives, I knew I couldn't refuse, not if I wanted to maintain the appearance of normalcy. "Studies show that community cleanup events build neighborhood cohesion while addressing environmental concerns," I explained, drawing on my background in community organizing. "Plus, it's budget-friendly and inclusive. Everyone from kids to seniors can participate." Carolyn sipped her iced tea, her eyes never leaving my face. "Interesting timing," she remarked casually. "Your sudden interest in neighborhood improvement?" "I've always been interested," I replied evenly. "You've just been too busy to notice." A flash of, something, anger, respect, crossed her features before her mask of pleasantness returned. "Well, I suppose we could add it to the agenda for next month's activities. Though I must say I prefer initiatives with more visual impact. Donors appreciate seeing tangible results for their contributions." I seized the opening. Speaking of donors, I'd love to learn more about the association's fundraising approach. My previous neighborhood had such a different structure. Our financial matters are quite sophisticated, she replied, a hint of condescension in her tone. We maintain multiple funds for different projects. Like the Maplewood Senior Housing Project? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Carolyn set down her glass with deliberate slowness. That project was before your time, she said, her voice dangerously soft, and a painful chapter for our community. The betrayal by someone we all trusted left deep scars. Henry Brooks, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise quickly masked by practiced sadness. A tragic case. Brilliant man once, but the pressures of the project? Well, mental health is so fragile, isn't it? So I've heard. I kept my tone neutral, fighting to control my racing heart. It must have been difficult for everyone involved. It was, she agreed, studying me with new intensity. Particularly for those of us left to pick up the pieces, to restore trust in the community leadership. And you've certainly done that, I said, the compliment tasting bitter on my tongue. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Margaret mentioned she saw you at Willow Creek Park the other day. Rather far from Rosewood, isn't it? My blood ran cold. So I had been spotted. I like to explore different walking trails, I said lightly. The creek is beautiful this time of year. Carolyn stood, smoothing her linen pants. Well, I should review those committee reports before this evening. We'll consider your cleanup drive idea. The dismissal was clear. As I gathered my notes, she added casually, "Oh, and Emily, be careful around the creek area. I hear there's been a homeless man bothering people there, possibly mentally unstable." Our eyes met, and in that moment, all pretense dropped away. We both knew that she knew. "Thank you for the warning," I said, forcing a smile. I always try to be careful about who I trust. The threat hung in the air between us as she showed me to the door. I made my decision that night. The next morning, I called Henry and said simply, "I'm in. Tell me what you need me to do." Over the next 2 weeks, I became a double agent in my own neighborhood. On the surface, I was Emily Parker, eager new, resident trying to fit into Rosewood's social hierarchy. I attended committee meetings, volunteered for events, and even managed to secure a position helping with the association's newsletter, a small role that nevertheless gave me access to the community center where many records were kept. Beneath this facade, I worked methodically with Henry and Linda to piece together the final evidence we needed. Linda, with her knowledge of the original project's finances, helped identify the discrepancies in the records I managed to photograph discreetly. Henry used his old connections to trace where the money had actually gone. The most damning evidence came unexpectedly through Pastor Raymond. After services one Sunday, he asked to speak with me privately in his office. "I've noticed you spending time with Linda Harper," he said carefully, once the door was closed. "And I've heard rumors about a certain former resident being back in town." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Emily," he said gently, "I've been at this church for 30 years. I was here when the Maplewood project fell apart. I performed the funeral for Henry's wife when she died of a heart attack shortly after. The scandal broke." His eyes held mine steadily. "I never believed he was guilty." Relief washed over me. "Then you know what we're trying to do." He nodded, reaching into his desk drawer. "Which is why I want you to have this." He handed me a sealed envelope. Letters from Carolyn to the church board, dated 5 years ago. She was pushing for us to withdraw our financial support from the Maplewood project just weeks before the scandal broke, citing concerns about management that she never specified. "Why didn't you come forward with these before?" The church was in financial trouble back then. Carolyn's husband was our biggest donor. Shame crossed his face. "I compromised where I shouldn't have, but I kept the letters, knowing someday the truth would need to come out." I carefully tucked the envelope into my purse. "Thank you, Pastor Raymond. This could be the missing piece we needed." As I left the church, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Henry's burner phone. "City council meeting moved up. Vote on rezoning happening Friday. Need to act now." My heart sank. We had been counting on having another week to compile everything and determine the best approach for making it public. Friday was just 4 days away. I hurried to my car, only to find Carolyn leaning against it, arms crossed, smile predatory. "Emergency church business?" she asked, nodding toward the building I'd just exited. "Just chatting with Pastor Raymond about the summer youth program," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Funny, I thought the youth committee met on Thursdays. She pushed herself away from my car, stepping closer. You've been busy lately, Emily. So many meetings, so many new friends. Just trying to get involved like you suggested when I first moved here. Yes, well, her smile tightened. Involvement is good, as long as it's the right kind of involvement, with the right people. The threat was unmistakable. As she walked away, she called, over her shoulder, "Don't forget the association gala on Friday evening. As our newest newsletter volunteer, your attendance is expected." Friday, the same day as the city council vote. As I drove home, my mind raced. Carolyn was closing in. Our timeline had been accelerated. And now I was being deliberately kept busy during the crucial council meeting where the rezoning would be decided. We needed a new plan, one that would expose Carolyn publicly, irrefutably, and in a way that couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. That night, I called Henry and Linda to my house. As we sat in my dimly lit living room, the blinds drawn against potential prying eyes, I laid out what I knew. Carolyn suspects something, I concluded, and she's made sure I'll be at the gala while the council votes on the rezoning. Henry nodded grimly. She's always been 10 steps ahead. It's how she's maintained control all these years. Then we need to be 11 steps ahead, Linda said with surprising fire. It's time to stop playing by her rules. We looked at her with surprise. Linda, always the voice of caution, was now advocating for bold action. What are you suggesting? I asked. A slow smile spread across her face. The association gala is Carolyn's crowning achievement each year. Every important person in town attends, including the mayor and the city council members. Understanding dawned on me. You want to expose her there? In front of everyone? It's risky, Henry warned. If we fail, we'll have no second chance. We've been careful for 5 years, Linda replied. And where has it gotten us? The land is about to be rezoned. Henry is still living in the shadows, and Carolyn is more powerful than ever. She reached out, grasping both our hands. Sometimes the truth needs a spotlight. Planning an ambush at Carolyn's gala was like choreographing a dangerous dance. We had 3 days to perfect every step, anticipate every potential misstep, and prepare for the inevitable counterattack. Henry, Linda, and I met each evening in my basement, windows covered, voices low, strategizing until the early morning hours. The key is timing, Henry explained, spreading our evidence across my coffee table. Too early in the evening, and the council members might leave before the vote. Too late, and Carolyn could find a way to discredit us or shut it down. And we need the press there, Linda added. Without media coverage, this becomes a he said, she said that Carolyn can spin her way out of. I nodded, thinking through the logistics. I know Sarah Chen from the local newspaper. She covered some of my charity events in my old neighborhood. If I can get her an anonymous tip about a major community revelation at the gala. Perfect, Henry said, his eyes lighting up with a fire I hadn't seen before. Now for the presentation itself. We organized our evidence methodically. Bank statements showing the diverted funds, emails between Carolyn and developers planning the luxury condos years before the Maplewood project failed, the contract promising her a penthouse unit in exchange for facilitating the rezoning, and testimonials from former project staff who had been silenced through various means. What about physical evidence? I asked. Documents can be dismissed as forgeries. Henry reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a small device. This is where modern technology helps us. 5 years ago, I couldn't prove anything because it was my word against hers. But now, he held up what looked like a voice recorder. This contains every conversation I've had with Carolyn since I returned to town 3 months ago, including one where she explicitly admits to framing me. My eyes widened. You've been meeting with her? But she told everyone you were dangerous, unstable, which made it all the easier for me to approach her as a beggar, someone beneath her notice, Henry explained. She never recognized me with my beard and tattered clothes. To her, I was just another homeless man to dismiss, perhaps throw $1 too if others were watching. But how did you get her to talk about what happened? Linda asked, equally astonished. A grim smile crossed Henry's face. I told her I had found some old papers near the Maplewood site, papers that might interest certain people. She assumed I was trying to blackmail her for a few dollars. Instead, she gave me something far more valuable. Confession. That's brilliant, I whispered, a new respect for Henry blooming in my chest. All this time, living on the margins, he had been meticulously building his case. There's just one problem, Linda interjected, ever practical. How does Henry get into the gala? It's strictly invitation only with security at every entrance. We fell silent, contemplating this significant obstacle. I might have a solution, I said slowly as an idea formed, but it requires help from someone else. Someone we're not sure we can trust completely. Pastor Raymond? Henry guessed. I nodded. He's always invited to these events. If he brought Henry as his guest, it's risky, Linda warned. If Raymond tips off Carolyn, I don't think he will, I said, remembering the shame in the pastor's eyes when he'd handed me the incriminating letters. He wants redemption as much as we want justice. The next morning, I visited the church again, this time with Henry, cleaned up and dressed in borrowed clothes that disguised his usual appearance. Pastor Raymond listened gravely to our plan, his hands folded on his desk. What you're proposing could tear this community apart, he said when we finished. This community is already broken, Henry replied quietly. It's been broken since the day truth and compassion were sacrificed for property values and appearances. Raymond studied Henry's face for a long moment, then nodded. I've carried the weight of my silence for 5 years. It's time. He turned to me. I'll bring Henry as my guest. But you should know, Carolyn has assigned seating for these events. You won't be anywhere near the stage when the moment comes. I've thought of that, I assured him. All I need is to be in the room. That evening, as I was finalizing details for our plan, a knock at my door startled me. I quickly hid the documents under a couch cushion before answering. Margaret stood on my porch, her usual nervous energy even more pronounced. Emily, hi. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off your gala packet. She thrust an envelope into my hands. Table assignments, parking instructions, dress code. You know how particular Carolyn is about these things. Thank you, I said, trying to sound normal while wondering if this was just a pretext to spy on me. Margaret lingered, shifting her weight from foot to foot. So, are you excited about your first Rosewood Gala? Very, I lied. It sounds like quite an event. Oh, it is. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. The decorations, the food, the speeches. Carolyn always gives the most inspiring speeches. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, though this year might be extra special. My pulse quickened. How so? Margaret glanced over her shoulder, then leaned closer. Carolyn's been so secretive, making all these private calls, but I overheard her telling her husband that Friday's gala will cement her legacy in Rosewood forever. She's planning some big announcement. A chill ran down my spine. What was Carolyn planning? Had she somehow discovered our scheme and prepared a counterattack? Thanks for the insider info, I said, forcing a smile. I'll look forward to the surprise. After Margaret left, I immediately called Henry and Linda to relay this new information. We spent hours speculating about what Carolyn might announce, but without more details, we could only strengthen our resolve to move forward with our plan. Friday arrived with a sense of impending collision. I spent the day in a state of controlled panic, checking and rechecking every element of our strategy. By late afternoon, I was dressed in a simple but elegant black cocktail dress. My hair swept up, a small clutch containing only the essentials, my phone, lipstick, and a USB drive with copies of all our evidence. Linda called as I was putting on my earrings. The city council meeting just ended, she reported, her voice tight with tension. They approved the rezoning. Construction on the luxury condos is set to begin next month. My heart sank. So we're too late to stop the vote. Yes, she acknowledged, but not too late to ensure justice is served and the truth is known. The rezoning can be challenged if fraud is proven. I'll see you there, I said, drawing strength from her determination. The Rosewood Country Club glowed with warm light as I drove up the winding entrance. Valets in crisp uniforms took guests' cars while photographers snapped pictures of the community's elite arriving in their finery. I handed my keys to a young attendant and took a deep breath, steadying my nerves before walking toward the entrance. Emily, you look stunning, Carolyn's voice rang out as she approached. Resplendent in a designer gown, diamonds glittering at her throat. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes were calculating as they swept over me. I'm so glad you could make it to your first gala. I wouldn't have missed it, I replied, returning her smile with equal insincerity. She linked her arm through mine, guiding me inside with a grip that was just a little too tight. I've seated you with some of our newer committee members, people I think you should get to know better. Translation: as far from the action as possible. How thoughtful, I murmured as we entered the ballroom. The space had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over dozens of elegantly set tables. A stage at the front was decorated with flowers and a podium bearing the Rosewood Association logo. A banner overhead read, "Community Excellence," in elegant script. Carolyn steered me toward a table near the back, where several people I vaguely recognized from committee meetings were already seated. "Enjoy your evening," she said, her tone making it clear that I was expected to stay put. As she walked away, I scanned the room for our allies. Pastor Raymond had not yet arrived with Henry. Linda was seated at a table near the middle of the room, looking elegant despite her age, nodding politely as a younger woman spoke to her. I checked my watch. 7:30. Dinner would be served at 8, followed by Carolyn's speech and whatever announcement she had planned. Our moment would come immediately after, before anyone could leave, provided, of course, that Henry made it inside. By 8:15, with the first course being served and still no sign of Pastor Raymond or Henry, my anxiety reached a fever pitch. Had they been stopped at the door? Had Carolyn somehow discovered our plan? I picked at my salad, barely tasting it while maintaining a facade of pleasant conversation with my table mates. "First time at the gala?" asked a woman to my right. Jessica, I thought her name was, though I couldn't be certain. "Yes," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's quite impressive." "Wait until the speeches," she said with a knowing look. Carolyn always saves something special for these events. Last year, she announced the new playground funding. The year before, it was the community garden expansion. Any idea what it might be this time? I probed, wondering if Margaret's hint about a major announcement was common knowledge. Jessica shook her head. "She's been unusually secretive, but the rumor is it's connected to the Maplewood property. Now that the rezoning passed, she probably has some grand vision to share." I nearly choked on my water. The Maplewood property, of course. Carolyn wouldn't just be content with getting her luxury condo, she would want public adoration for whatever community benefit she claimed the development would bring. The sound of the ballroom doors opening drew my attention. Pastor Raymond entered, and beside him, almost unrecognizable in a well-fitted suit, his white beard neatly trimmed, his posture straight and dignified, was Henry Brooks. A ripple of confused murmurs spread through the room. The older residents clearly recognized him, despite the years and hardships that had changed his appearance. Younger attendees looked puzzled by the reaction. Carolyn, who had been making her rounds among the tables, froze mid-conversation. Even from across the room, I could see the color drain from her face before she quickly composed herself and whispered something to a staff member, who immediately hurried toward the entrance. I watched, heart in my throat, as the staff member approached Pastor Raymond. They exchanged words. Raymond smiled pleasantly and presented what appeared to be invitations. After a moment of hesitation, the staff member nodded and escorted them to a table, not far from where Linda sat. Our plan was still viable. I exhaled slowly. Throughout the main course, I noticed Carolyn making subtle, but frantic movements, checking her phone, whispering to her husband, dispatching staff on unclear errands. She knew something was wrong, but couldn't identify exactly what or how to counter it without creating a scene. By the time dessert was served, a palpable tension had settled over the room. Those who recognized Henry kept glancing in his direction, then at Carolyn, clearly puzzled by his presence and her apparent discomfort. At precisely 9:30, Carolyn rose and approached the podium, her composure restored, her smile dazzling under the lights. The room fell silent. "Friends, neighbors, distinguished guests," she began, her voice melodic and practiced. "For 15 years, I've had the privilege of serving as your association president, working alongside each of you to make Rosewood not just a neighborhood, but a true community." Applause followed this opening, though I noticed it was less enthusiastic from those seated near Henry. "Tonight, as we celebrate another year of growth and prosperity, I'm thrilled to share some exciting news." She paused for effect. "As many of you know, the City Council today approved the rezoning of the long-vacant Maplewood property." Murmurs of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd. "What you may not know is that through extensive negotiations with the developers, I've secured a commitment that 20% of the profits from this luxury development will fund a new community initiative, the Sanders Youth Leadership Academy." More applause, louder this time. I had to admit it was a masterful move. Who could object to a program for young people? This academy will provide mentorship and scholarship opportunities for Rosewood's most promising students, ensuring our community's legacy of excellence continues for generations to come. She smiled broadly. "Construction begins next month, and I invite all of you to join me for the groundbreaking ceremony." As the audience clapped, I caught Linda's eye across the room. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. It was time. Carolyn continued. Before we conclude the formal portion of our evening, I'd like to… Excuse me. The voice was firm, dignified, and immediately recognizable to many in the room. Henry Brooks had risen from his seat, standing tall despite his years of hardship. If I might say a few words? A hush fell over the gathering. Carolyn's smile became rigid. I'm afraid we don't have unscheduled speakers at our gala, sir. Perhaps after the formal program. I think the community might want to hear what I have to say, Carolyn. Henry's use of her first name sent another ripple of whispers through the crowd, especially regarding the Maplewood property. Carolyn's eyes darted to the security personnel near the doors, but before she could signal them, Pastor Raymond stood as well. As a longtime member of this community and a personal guest of mine, I believe Mr. Brooks has earned the right to speak, he said, his ministerial authority carrying weight with the crowd. Trapped by social protocol and public scrutiny, Carolyn had no choice but to step aside, her face a mask of controlled fury. Of course, she said through gritted teeth. We always value diverse perspectives. Henry walked slowly to the podium, his gait steady, his eyes never leaving Carolyn as she returned to her seat. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice settling in water glasses. For those who don't recognize me, my name is Henry Brooks, he began, his voice gaining strength with each word. 15 years ago, I founded the Rosewood Neighborhood Association. 10 years ago, I initiated the Maplewood Senior Housing Project to ensure our elderly residents wouldn't be priced out of the community they helped build. Recognition dawned on more faces now. The younger residents leaned forward, sensing they were witnessing something significant. And 5 years ago, Henry continued, I was falsely accused of embezzling the project. Funds, accusations that cost me my reputation, my home, and nearly my life. Carolyn stood abruptly. This is outrageous. Security… Please sit down, Mrs. Sanders, came another voice. The mayor's. I believe we should hear Mr. Brooks out. Seething, Carolyn complied. I rose from my seat, moving quietly along the perimeter of the room until I reached the audiovisual control booth where a young technician sat. I have the presentation slides for Mr. Brooks, I said confidently, holding up my USB drive. The technician, assuming I was part of the program, nodded and accepted it. As Henry continued his story, detailing the original vision for the Maplewood project and how it had been corrupted, the screen behind him came to life, displaying the first of our meticulously organized evidence. Files. The original project plans contrasted with Carolyn's secret communications with developers. We have banking records, Henry said as the screen changed to show the financial documents, proving that nearly $2 million in project funds were diverted to offshore accounts controlled by Carolyn Sanders. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom. Carolyn surged to her feet again. These are forgeries. This man is mentally unstable. Everyone knows that. Are these forgeries too, Carolyn? Linda called out, her elderly voice surprisingly strong as she held up the letters Pastor Raymond had provided. Your own words planning to sabotage the project years before you accused Henry? The room erupted in confused chatter. The mayor stood, raising his hands for quiet. These are serious. Allegations that should be addressed through proper channels, not at a community event. I agree, Henry said calmly, which is why I've already provided copies of all this evidence to the district attorney's office and the state banking commission. He paused, letting this sink in. But there's one more piece of evidence I think everyone here deserves to hear. He pulled out the small recording device and pressed play. Carolyn's voice, unmistakable despite the slight graininess of the recording, filled the room. Of course I took the money, you fool. Do you think affordable housing for old people would have increased our property values? Brooks was an idealistic idiot. It was so easy to frame him. A few forged signatures, some rumors about gambling debts, and everyone believed exactly what I wanted them to. Now get out of my sight before I call the police about a homeless man harassing me. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye turned to Carolyn, who stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and rage. You, she finally hissed, pointing at Henry. You tricked me. No, Carolyn, he replied evenly. You tricked an entire community. I merely revealed the truth. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests rose from their seats, voices overlapping in shock, anger, and disbelief. Carolyn's husband, a typically silent figure at these events, grabbed her arm and whispered urgently in her ear, likely advising retreat. But Carolyn Sanders had not maintained her position of power for 15 years by backing down easily. "This is slander!" she shouted over the din, her composure shattered. "That recording is clearly edited. I would never—" "I think we've heard enough, Mrs. Sanders," the mayor interrupted, his political instincts kicking in as he distanced himself from the brewing scandal. He gestured to his assistant. "Get the city attorney on the phone. Now." Carolyn scanned the room frantically, searching for allies, but found only stunned faces or averted gazes. Even Margaret, her most devoted follower, sat with her head bowed, unable to meet her mentor's desperate eyes. In that moment, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Not for what Carolyn had done. Her actions were inexcusable. But for the naked fear now visible beneath her crumbling facade. The mighty Queen of Rosewood was suddenly just a woman facing the consequences of her own ruthless ambition. Security personnel moved toward the exits. Not to remove Henry as Carolyn might have hoped, but to prevent anyone from leaving before authorities arrived. The local reporter Sarah Chen, whom I had anonymously tipped off, was frantically taking notes and photos, ensuring this would be front-page news by morning. I made my way through the stunned crowd toward Linda, who sat with quiet dignity, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. When I reached her, she clasped my hand tightly. 5 years, she whispered. 5 years I've carried this burden, knowing the truth but too afraid to speak it. You did speak it, I assured her, when it mattered most. Pastor Raymond had moved to stand beside Henry at the podium, a physical symbol of his support. "I believe," he addressed the crowd, his calm voice cutting through the chaos, "that we all need to take a moment to absorb what we've learned tonight. This is a deeply troubling revelation for our community, but also an opportunity for healing and renewal." Slowly, the room quieted, people returning to their seats, their faces reflecting varying degrees of shock, anger, and confusion. "While we await the authorities," the Yowie pastor continued, "I invite Mr. Brooks to share his vision for what Rosewood could still become, the community he originally intended to build." Henry nodded gratefully and leaned toward the microphone again. "The Maplewood Senior Housing Project wasn't just about affordable housing," he explained, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "It was about honoring our elders, preserving the diversity that makes a neighborhood rich in experience and wisdom. It was about creating a place where people weren't valued by their property assessments, but by their contributions to each other's lives." As he spoke, I watched faces in the audience transform, hardness softening, skepticism giving way to contemplation. Even those who had benefited from Carolyn's regime seemed moved by the reminder of what had been lost. "That vision isn't dead," Henry continued. "The land has been rezoned, yes, but plans can change. Developers can be persuaded. Communities can heal, but only if we choose truth over convenience, compassion over property values." A commotion at the back of the ballroom interrupted his speech. 2 police officers entered, followed by a woman in a sharp suit whom I recognized as the district attorney. They moved directly to Carolyn's table. "Carolyn Sanders," the DA said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding the financial discrepancies in the Maplewood project and subsequent events." Carolyn's husband stood protectively. "My wife will cooperate fully, but this is hardly the appropriate venue. Perhaps tomorrow at our attorney's office?" "This isn't a request, Mr. Sanders," the DA cut in firmly. "And given the evidence we've received, including financial records suggesting imminent plans to leave the country, we're not inclined to wait." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Carolyn had been planning to flee. As the officers escorted a shell-shocked Carolyn toward the exit, she passed close to where I stood with Linda. She paused briefly, her eyes locking with mine. "You," she said softly, recognition and hatred mingling in her gaze. "The newcomer. I knew you'd be trouble. I just wanted to belong," I replied honestly. "You never gave me that chance." Something flickered in her eyes. Perhaps a momentary understanding that her own insecurity had created her worst enemy, before the officers gently but firmly guided her away. The gala effectively ended with Carolyn's departure. Guests gathered in stunned clusters, processing the evening's revelations. The mayor huddled with city council members present, likely strategizing damage control. Henry was surrounded by longtime residents, some offering tearful apologies for believing the lies, others expressing outrage on his behalf. I found myself standing, alone near the dessert table, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. After weeks of secrecy and tension, the truth was finally out. Whatever happened next would happen in the light. You did this, didn't you? I turned to find Margaret beside me, her expression unreadable. I helped bring the truth to light, I acknowledged cautiously, along with others who knew what really happened. She nodded, slowly. I suspected something when I saw you with Linda so often. Carolyn did too. She had me watching you. I know. What I don't understand, Margaret continued, genuine confusion in her voice, is why you cared so much. You barely knew Henry. You're new here. This wasn't your fight. I considered her question carefully. Maybe that's exactly why it needed to be me. I wasn't tangled in years of relationships and favors and threats. I could see clearly what had become normal for everyone else. And now? She asked. What happens to Rosewood now? It was a question I hadn't fully considered in our rush to expose Carolyn. What would this revelation do to the community? Would it fracture under the weight of betrayal and complicity, or could it somehow emerge stronger? I don't know, I admitted. But I think that's for all of us to decide together. No more secret committees or exclusive hierarchies. Just neighbors finding a way forward. Margaret seemed to consider this, then nodded once before walking away, already adapting to the new reality taking shape around us. As the ballroom gradually emptied, Henry approached me, Pastor Raymond and Linda at his side. Despite the emotional exhaustion evident in his face, he stood straighter than I'd ever seen him, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Emily, he said, taking my hands in his. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, I assured him. Seeing justice done is enough. Justice is just the beginning, he replied, a determined gleam in his eyes. The real work starts tomorrow. Linda nodded in agreement. Rebuilding what was lost, healing old wounds, and creating the community we always meant this to be, Pastor Raymond added. As we walked together toward the exit, the empty ballroom behind us felt symbolic, the artificial glamour of Carolyn's reign giving way to something simpler but infinitely more valuable. Truth, reconciliation, and the promise of a fresh start. Outside, the summer night was warm and star-filled. For the first time since moving to Rosewood Drive, I felt like I might truly belong. The week following the gala was a whirlwind of activity. News of Carolyn's arrest and the scandal spread far beyond Rosewood, making headlines in regional papers and even briefly trending on social media. Reporters camped outside the community center, hungry for quotes from residents about the neighborhood queen's fall from grace, as one particularly dramatic headline put it. I kept a low profile, declining interview requests and focusing instead on the more substantive work beginning to take shape. Henry, with remarkable resilience, had emerged as the calm center in the storm of community upheaval. He temporarily moved into Pastor Raymond's guest house, trading his years of homelessness for a modest but dignified place to regroup. The initial shock among residents gave way to a complex mixture of emotions. Betrayal from those who had trusted Carolyn implicitly, vindication for those who had harbored quiet suspicions, and for many, an uncomfortable reckoning with their own complicity, the times they had looked away from her methods because they benefited from the results. On the Wednesday after the gala, Henry called an informal community meeting at the church. The turnout was remarkable. Nearly every household in Rosewood was represented, filling the pews and spilling into the aisles. I didn't call this meeting to dwell on the past, Henry began, standing before his neighbors not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a leader, offering direction. What's done is done. Carolyn will face legal consequences for her actions, and the courts will determine appropriate restitution. He paused, his clear blue eyes scanning the crowd. But the greater harm wasn't financial. It was what happened to our community, the atmosphere of fear, the erosion of trust, the valuing of appearances over substance. That damage can't be fixed by the courts. Only we can heal that. Together. What followed was the most honest conversation I'd ever witnessed in a community setting. People spoke openly about their experiences under Carolyn's leadership, the subtle threats, the social ostracism for those who questioned her decisions, the gradual acceptance of her values as the neighborhood's values. I knew something was wrong with the Maplewood accounts, admitted Frank Peterson, who had served as association treasurer during the critical period. But when I raised concerns, Carolyn reminded me that my daughter was being considered for a prestigious internship that her husband could influence. I told myself it was probably just an accounting error and let it go. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, Henry. Similar confessions followed. Small surrenders of integrity that, accumulated over years, had enabled Carolyn's corruption to flourish. Rather than responding with judgment, Henry acknowledged each speaker with compassion and understanding. "We all make compromises to protect what we love," he said. "The question isn't why we failed in the past, but how we move forward now." By meeting's end, concrete plans were taking shape. A provisional neighborhood council was formed, with rotating leadership and transparent accounting practices. Committees were established to address immediate concerns, from reviewing association bylaws to reconsidering the Maplewood development plans. I found myself appointed to lead the Maplewood Committee, working directly with Henry to explore whether the luxury condo development could be modified to include the affordable senior housing originally envisioned. It wouldn't be easy. Contracts had been signed and the rezoning approved, but the public scandal gave us leverage with developers eager to distance themselves from Carolyn's tainted project. As summer turned to fall, a fragile but genuine renewal took root in Rosewood. The Provisional Council evolved into a more permanent structure, with quarterly town halls ensuring all voices could be heard. Linda Harper, her confidence restored, became the neighborhood historian, documenting both the community's original vision and its recent reckoning for future residents. The Maplewood project underwent a dramatic redesign. Through intensive negotiations and with unexpected support from the mayor, eager to associate himself with the community's redemption story, we secured a compromise. Half the development would remain upscale condominiums, while the other half would offer affordable units for seniors and lower-income families. The project was renamed Brooks Commons, in honor of the man whose vision had finally been vindicated. As for Carolyn, her legal troubles mounted as investigators uncovered financial improprieties extending far beyond the Maplewood project. Her husband filed for divorce, their magnificent house on Rosewood Drive was sold, and the Sanders name became synonymous with cautionary tales about unchecked power in community governance. Margaret, surprisingly, became one of the most dedicated volunteers in the neighborhood's renewal efforts. "I spent 15 years being Carolyn's shadow," she explained when I asked about her transformation. "I want to discover who I am without her influence." By December, with the first snow dusting Rosewood Drive, the community gathered for a holiday celebration in the park, the same park where I had first encountered Henry months earlier. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the artificial glamour of Carolyn's galas. Children built snowmen while parents chatted around fire pits. Homemade cookies, including my chocolate chip ones, now in high demand, filled treat tables. And most strikingly, there was an ease among neighbors that had been absent under Carolyn's reign, a genuine warmth that no amount of fancy decorations could fabricate. Henry found me near the hot chocolate station, his appearance transformed. From the man I'd met on that park bench, properly nourished and rested with proper winter clothing and regular medical care, he looked a decade younger. More importantly, the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet contentment. "Quite a different scene from the last community gathering, isn't it?" he remarked, nodding toward the relaxed crowd. "Night and day," I agreed, though I still can't believe how much has changed in just a few months. "Communities can heal quickly when given the chance," Henry said. "People naturally gravitate toward connection and authenticity when the barriers are removed." We walked together through the park, greeting neighbors who now called us both by name, accepting thanks that had become less effusive but more genuine as the months passed. "You know," Henry said thoughtfully as we paused near the playground, "when I first approached you that night at the block party, I was merely looking for an ally, someone outside Carolyn's influence who might help me expose the truth. I never expected to find a friend." "Nor I admitted. After my divorce, I came to Rosewood looking for a fresh start, somewhere to rebuild. I certainly didn't plan to become part of a neighborhood revolution." Henry smiled. "Sometimes the path we need isn't the one we think we're walking." As we completed our circuit of the park, Pastor Raymond approached with Linda on his arm, both bundled against the cold. "The council has been discussing a permanent memorial," Raymond announced, "something to commemorate both the original vision for Rosewood and its recent redemption." "Nothing with my name on it, I hope," Henry protested modestly. "Actually," Linda interjected with a mischievous smile, "we were thinking of dedicating this park to Emily. Without her courage to stand with you when it mattered most, who knows how much longer Carolyn's reign might have continued?" I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "That's completely unnecessary. I just did what anyone would do." "But that's just it," Henry said gently. "Most people didn't. Most people looked away, justified, rationalized. You saw injustice and refused to accept it as normal, even when it would have been easier to go along." Pastor Raymond nodded agreement. The plaque won't bear anyone's name, just a simple message. The truth never goes away, it just waits to be recognized. As dusk fell and holiday lights twinkled on throughout the park, I found myself surrounded by what I had sought all along. Not just neighbors, but a true community. In helping Henry reclaim his dignity, I had found my own place in Rosewood. Later that evening, as neighbors dispersed to their homes, I lingered by the park entrance, watching the last children reluctantly abandon their snow fort as parents called them for dinner. Henry joined me, his breath visible in the cold air. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I considered the question, my gaze taking in the peaceful street where, just months ago, I had felt so isolated and unwelcome. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the most important acts of courage aren't grand gestures, but small moments of human connection," I replied. Sandwich offered to a stranger. A truth spoken when silence would be easier. A hand extended across the divide that fear creates between us. Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's the real foundation of any community worth building. Not property values or perfect appearances, but the willingness to see each other's humanity, even when it's hidden beneath years of pain or masks of prosperity. As we walked together down Rosewood Drive, past homes warm with light and life, I felt a profound sense of peace. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. No real community ever is. But it was honest now, with all its flaws and strengths acknowledged. And in that honesty lay the possibility of something truly beautiful. A place where belonging wasn't something to be earned through conformity, but a birthright offered freely to all who sought it. That night, as snowflakes drifted past my window, I realized that in helping to unmask Carolyn, I had also removed my own mask. The protective shell I'd built after my divorce, the fear of vulnerability that had kept me isolated even before moving to Rosewood. In finding my voice to speak for Henry, I had rediscovered my own strength. And that, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of all.